Good Friday morning, guys. My name is Jerry Miller, and thank you kindly for joining us on Real Talk with Keith Smith. It's an absolute pleasure to connect with you guys through the I Love CVille Network on a show that is headlined by Yes Realty Partners and one of its principals, Keith Smith, the Distinguished Gentleman. We're live in our studio in downtown Charlottesville in the heart of a 300,000 person region that is dynamic and ever changing. You, the viewer and listener, can offer perspective and challenge our panel in respectful fashion by asking questions or sharing your thoughts in whatever platform you're watching upon, and I will relay them live on air. Judah Wickhauer is behind the camera. He is getting LinkedIn up and running. Confirm when we do. And I want to kindly welcome Keith Smith and Supervisors Chris Fairchild and Ned Gallaway to the show as elected officials from 4 different jurisdictions are watching the program. Judah Wickhauer, studio camera and a 4-shot. Keith Smith, good Friday morning to you.
Good Friday morning, gentlemen. It's chairman, right? You're the chair of,
correct.
Of the thing.
For now.
For the moment. For the moment. That might
It's early in the year.
It's early in the year. That may change in November. You never know on that end of it, which we're going to get into that a little bit later. So, gentlemen, I just wanted to thank you. We had an awesome summit yesterday, and Chris, I was thinking about you on the way in. So if those are watching and listening, Chris and I used to run half marathons and long distance races together, and the summits take so long to get to the day, right? This is a year's worth of work to get there, and it was over. It's kind of like when you finish your race or your marathon, you're like, there's a little bit of a letdown, but we're back up with coffee and maybe a sip or two of bourbon and keep on moving. So, and then we've got Ned Gallaway, Albemarle County Board of Supervisor Extraordinaire, joining us. We'll just keep on rolling here. So what do you two gentlemen thought? How did we do yesterday, right? How did we do from a summit's perspective? And then we'll dive into a couple other questions.
I would say, generally speaking, I thought you did a great job. And I'm not one to fluff it when I don't think so. I think the opportunity for people of differing thoughts and backgrounds and efforts to come together and respectfully have a conversation about how you make change is needed.
You and I talk about this all the time, right? We may not see eye to eye on certain things, but we always respect each other's opinion, and we typically go out for a drink afterwards. So I think the whole world should be more along those lines. What do you think, Ned?
I thought it was a tremendous success. I think staff did one hell of a job.
Oh, yeah.
Keith was on the summit committee that did a lot of the work to get that put together. It's a lot of logistics they have to pull up. Just forget the content and what they have to deliver in terms of speakers and all of that. But just pulling it off that day and then making sure the mics are working and all that stuff. But the sentiment there, the energy in the room felt good.
Yeah.
So as people were arriving and as they were leaving, everybody was positive. The networking events, were working out well. So I think when you feel that kind of vibe, I think I mentioned that in one of the interviews somebody did yesterday. It's like there's a good feel here, which usually would then or not hope to, but I think it will turn into actual projects and things that will get to the solutions that were discussed yesterday.
I think we should do this because I'm seeing the comments in the feed here. I don't think any of the legacy media has reported on what happened yesterday yet. The coverage,
except for Embassy 29.
Well, I'm looking on their website. It's not on their website.
Right now. That's interesting.
And folks with watching the 11
I put it on
11
my
o'clock
Facebook.
news just do not do that anymore. So a lot of people are asking, what exactly are you guys talking about here?
Got it.
Yeah. So this is probably the first documented of the who, what, when, where, why of what's happened right now.
So the Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership was formed under the umbrella of the Thomas Jefferson Planning District Commission. So I'm currently the chair of that. Keith is the current vice chair. And that's a body that the executive committee gets together more regularly, but the full partnership will meet each quarter. It is built around 4 pillars of which those 4 pillars work towards affordable housing issues. So we discuss what the problems are, try to come up with solutions for folks. Those 4 pillars are the public sector, so not just electeds, but our staff and the people that work on housing. And then you have the private sector, so the for-profits, the developers, the folks that are out there building the housing. Then we have the nonprofit sectors, your habitats, your community land trust, place like that. And then we have our citizens, the folks that we're serving. And all of those 4 different areas are represented in our partnership. The partnership decided, this was our 3rd summit, right? We do it every other year. And it's to pull together and build on the work that we do throughout the year, and then to try to bring in experts and bring in folks that do this work, and share that not just with our partnership, but with the broader community. And basically, the summit is like a big partnership meeting. We at the beginning yesterday in the intro, we went around and said, raise your hand if you're from the public sector, raise your hand and there was a great mix of people from all of those sectors.
We sold out. We had 200 confirmed seats. We booked it for 200. We ended up with 220. There was roughly 20 people that came in, mostly the elected officials, which I don't understand why, but we'll leave that alone. Maybe elected officials can't read Evites or something along those lines. But it was mostly elected officials that came in. But to your point, and jump in, Chris. The first two summits. Did you attend any of the?
I did not.
This is the first one.
Correct.
The first two summits were more about what was the crisis or what was the issue, right? This one was very solution focused, but yeah. So anyway, I ended up doing it, and I think we did a quick little interview on 29, and I don't know where it is, and I sent the link out this morning. I said, look, Mom, first TV interview without handcuffs on. So.
I want to say, if I'm hacking and all that,
You're good.
I apologize.
Yeah.
But,
I thought you were just going for that deep, sexy voice.
yeah,
You're good.
exactly. Yeah.
Well, if people wanted to learn more, they of course could go to the Thomas Jefferson Planning District or just Google Central Virginia Regional Housing Partnership. It will bring up the website where it's at, the members of the executive committee. They're all public meetings, so they're all things that the information that we go over on a more regular basis are all posted there. And correct me if I'm wrong, Keith, but at the summit, all the sessions were recorded.
Yeah, so that's a unique thing that we've done this year. So we were, anybody who's ever put on summits before, they're a tremendous amount of work. They're extremely expensive. And we've had some awesome sponsorships, and it's fully funded and ended up with about $4 or $5 grand left over, which is great news to kind of go to the next summit. But part of the expense was we brought in a company that videoed the whole thing. So they're going to be loaded on the website. So if you missed a session or want to go back and take a look at it, you can go ahead and replay your session over and over and over again. You were on 29 too. I saw your face.
Oh, was it really?
Yeah. Well, you had it anyway.
Now I got to go look at it.
There you go.
So, gentlemen, how about Chris? State of the union right now with Fluvanna County. We got budget season. Maybe we'll get some breaking news from the two gentlemen and how they're pursuing potentially another term in office. It's getting close to that time of year. Open-ended, Fluvanna County, Chris Fairchild.
Well, we're just coming off the reassessments, which we in Fluvanna do every 2 years, so that's certainly a hot topic. We had, on average, on residential, I'm guessing it came in at low 30-some% increase. Overall,
So we got to highlight this. On average, in Fluvanna County, assessments year over year upticked low 30%.
over a 2-year period.
Yeah, over a 2-year period. That is an astronomical uptick.
It is. With residential mostly coming in more in the 0 to 2 or 3 range. So on average, we came in about 23 or 24%. But when you just take single-family homes on smaller properties, I'm guessing it's in the low 30s. And then kind of an odd dynamic, but it seems odd at first, then it makes sense. Roughly 1,300 square feet and below were ones that saw the highest uptick, some of them as much as 60%. But the reason is because house prices are so high, that's the most affordable range. So suddenly that's the hot range.
Demand.
Yeah.
So I'll add some numbers to that, because I
Yeah.
crunched numbers this morning for today's show, just to talk about our county. Right, the median sales price at the year to date, as of today, from January 1 to today, is $398. This is in all of Fluvanna County. We'll
Yeah.
talk about breaking out Lake Monticello and the rest, but this is all of Fluvanna County. At the end of 24, that was $364. So we're already up 9.3% just from the end versus the numbers at the end of 2024. So we, in the first 2.5 months, roughly, have jumped up 9.3% from 364 to 398.
And I think you and I talked about last week, the assumption is that will be cyclical throughout the year, right? Meaning that the first couple months don't necessarily make a
Yeah, so
year.
what it is a step. The graph would look like a set of stairs, right?
Yeah.
It might go up a little bit, level off, go up a little
Or
bit,
down.
level off.
Yeah.
I don't see it going down,
Yeah.
right? I don't, the down is, I don't think in the cards at all. It's just a matter of how much it's gonna go up.
Yeah, so, I mean, we, it's a beautiful way of life in Fluvanna County. I just saw a report, I think last week, that 88% of our citizens own their own home, which is
Yeah.
a strong number. I think,
Yeah.
is that the highest in the region, do you know?
That I can't tell you, but 88% is high,
I
right?
bet you I'd be hard pressed to find another region
Yeah.
or another locality in Central Virginia
I think somebody like
beating that.
Somebody like Neil Williamson who's watching.
Neil's watching.
Could probably
Yeah.
crunch that data and send it
Yeah,
in.
but either way, I mean, it's a great number.
Tax rate, what do you guys do in that tax rate? Might throw that question to Supervisor Gallaway over
So,
here.
well, and I'll throw this quick if I can. So there's been a lot of confusion with the assessments over what the tax rate would be. And on the notices of the new assessment amounts, it states under our current fiscal year tax rate, 84.4, that under your new assessment, your tax rate would be X. The state directs that you have to do that, which is so odd to me, because the state also directs that you have to equalize. You can do whatever you want after you equalize, but equalizing, for those who don't know, means if with the added revenue that you would get off the values, that means you have to adjust the tax rate. If it's added revenue, then the tax rate goes down. And then, again, from there, you can build off of that, go up, down, or nowhere on the budget we're working on. So we equalized at 68.9 cents. We advertised the rate at 75, I guess, 2 meetings ago. And I suspect it's going to come in something under that.
So you and I had a great conversation last night after the thing, talking about equalization. And I think you mentioned you had a conversation with a citizen that you spent a couple hours or whatever amount of time, and you couldn't get it there. So I'd like to try to do a shorter version of it. Let's try to explain what equalization is. So I'm going to take
Yeah,
a
please.
shot at it, and
Absolutely.
then you tell me if I'm off. And Ned, jump in, because this is your world, right? So I'm currently paying $5,000 a year in real estate taxes on my personal home, right? So at the end of next year, when you come in with equalization works right, your assessments, your budgets, and your rate, I should be paying roughly the same amount of money in 2025 or 2026. That's equalization.
Right.
Right. So this is a math problem that you guys have to work on internally to match your budget with your assessments, with your rate, so I don't pay any more than $5,000, or there's some sort of percentage that you're allowed to go over on that. Is that a better explanation on that, Ned? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I mean, it's the year over year, you get the same money from the year before, and you just adjust the tax rate to accomplish that. So if assessments go up, the equalization brings your tax rate down. If assessments did the reverse, you'd have to actually increase your
Yeah.
So
tax rate. to
why in
equalize.
God's holy name do you have to put this current rate? Because it just freaks people out.
Well, the explanation is that when the notice goes out, many municipalities would not have equalized yet. So there's no real rate to attach to it.
But why is it there at all?
What's that?
Why is it even there
This
at
isn't
all?
it state code?
It is, yeah.
Yeah.
And it's so unfortunate, because the mass of the people, and every board member will tell you they've gotten a lot of contacts after the assessment came out. The mass of the people that are concerned are seeing that number. And although, it does explain on the back, kind of a fine print thing, that's not necessarily the real number, but it's understandable.
It freaks people out.
Yeah, I always say, if you're a couple that has kids and you both work all day, you get home, you got to feed the kids, be sure the homework gets done, cleaned up to bed, and then you do it again tomorrow. I don't know, until I was on the Board of Equalization years ago, that I would have known and understood that myself. I think I probably wouldn't. I think I'd see that number and be alarmed. So it's absolutely understandable, and it's a bit deceptive.
You want to jump in now?
I mean, I don't necessarily disagree with that. I think we do, when we go out and do our public town halls, we like our folks to know what the equalized rate is. It's almost just like, all right, look, folks, here's our current rate. Because assessments have gone up, especially over the last 3 years, 4 years in Albemarle County, I think it is a transparency thing that people should know what it would be if we equalized, so that they can say, all right, if you took the same money in you took in last year, what would the tax rate be? And I think in Albemarle, I said it the other day, I think it would be around 81 cents, something like that. We're at 84.5 right now for our tax rate. The proposed is a tax rate increase on that rate. So when you're going to go out to the public and talk about, well, here's the current rate, here's what we might propose, especially if it's an increase, and somebody wants to know, well, what would it be if you just got the same money last year? Well, that would be 81 cents.
Yeah.
But then, and I'm sure we'll get
That's
in.
also assuming the budget doesn't change either, right?
Well, right.
Right.
But costs go up, expenditures go up. So if you don't bring in more revenue and you do have increased expenditures and you're not going to increase your tax rate and you do equalize, then you're effectively going to have to make some cuts somewhere.
Right.
Just because you got the same revenue as last year doesn't mean the costs are going to remain the same. Your revenues, you can force that, but you can't. The only way to force keeping your expenditures are to get rid of some things. And what do I mean by that? Well, if you have growth and you need an extra firefighter, and you have the same revenue as last year, and you don't have that extra $150,000 to hire another firefighter and then equip that person, well, then you don't add it, and that's an effective cut. Some may disagree with the way I just worded that. Well, not adding a position's a cut, but it is if you have increased demand on your services and you're not keeping pace with what you need to staff it. So it gets.
And we've similarly tried to, as a county government, tried to get the word out of what the reality is of those numbers and in a number of different ways. I will say that if let's say the average is a 32% increase on homes, there is going to be some marginal, if we just went with the equalized rate of 68.9, there's going to be some marginal increase in what they pay because their value went up enough to make that happen.
So, your taxes are going up.
Yeah.
The question is how much, right?
Correct.
So in the how much,
If you had an increase that's above the average, your taxes would go up.
the average taxpayer in our county is probably going to go up,
Yeah.
right? Unless you make substantial cuts in the budget, which is
Right.
So let's talk about budget season, because I don't think a lot of people watching the show understand how that works and how long that process takes. So anybody want to jump in on budget season? And before I do that, there was a guy sitting at the table told me, if you want to know how an elected official is going to vote, watch him during budget season.
Yeah.
His name was Ned.
Yeah.
What's important,
So-
especially in election year, because what's coming out of our mouth in the fall, if you're running for reelection, you just finished a budget season. So are the priorities that you say, do they match what you voted on and where you put the dollars?
Yeah.
And that's important. I think it is a long process. A lot of it's driven by some state code type things that localities have to meet and timing of it all. So already, we've already had, the county executive gave the recommendation in late February. We've had now 3 work sessions. They get jammed together here. They all start to kind of run together in my head. We have another one Monday. By Wednesday already, we have to set and advertise the cap that the tax rate could be. So what that means is that, like right now, the county executive recommends it would push our tax rate up to 0.894. We have to advertise, unless the board picks a different number, what the cap would be. From that point forward, you can come down on the rate, but you just can't go above it. So you have to quickly get up to speed on what's going on with your budget, because if you want to do something different than what the county executive did in terms of maybe going further, well, then we have to make that decision by Wednesday.
So
And we have, I'm sorry, go ahead.
no, you're first.
But we did our advertised rate several weeks ago, and then this coming week, we will advertise, we'll set not only the advertised rate, but the all rates. We'll advertise the budget itself. So personal property, everything, that's what we'll advertise and then have the public hearing on it. And pretty much from you start working on it in January, and pretty much from sometime in February, it's a weekly thing that we, every week we're studying. The budget book, I can't imagine in your all's case, but at just over 100 million, the budget books is probably 6 inches thick. And then one thing we did different this year is this board said that nonprofits needed to turn in financials so we could.
Good.
Yeah, I mean,
That's great.
It's a big first step. And
Do we do that in Albemarle County?
Yeah, we used to do a process that was kind of in combination with CVille, and then we both kind of went and we've internalized now. But there is a process where they have to come in and we tier them, so you can look in our budget book and see where places score, and then in terms of effectiveness, and then what they're trying to help us achieve strategic plan-wise.
I like that. I like that.
Well, and part of what spawned that, one, it's good business practices. If it was I always think of government like a publicly traded company. You got a board of directors and you have all your shareholders, or stakeholders. And any publicly traded company that doesn't analyze the financials of where they are sending their money.
They're sending the money to.
Right.
Yeah.
And we found a nonprofit last year that had millions of dollars in the bank, and their director was being paid hundreds of thousands of dollars a year.
And came to you asking for money.
Yeah, and they have been for years, and I'm not slamming them. God bless them that they're in a good situation, but I don't know that the Fluvanna taxpayers need to be sending them more money.
Well, I'll tell you, as a chairperson of a nonprofit, I like to hear that, because
Yeah.
that puts me on an equal playing field.
Yeah,
You guys are talking about raising the meals tax.
that is a discussion. Yeah, I don't. Let's just say at this point, it's not something I'm for, and it'll probably be voted on in the next week or so. In Fluvanna, we're a county that has very little tourism. Almost all of our restaurants are around Lake Monticello in that beltway. We have some others. And when I go in those restaurants, almost everybody I see is from Fluvanna. And so
You're
if
just
we...
taxing your citizens.
Yeah, I say just raise your real estate rate then, because you're just adding more tax onto the people who live there. My interest was if we made Zions Crossroads a taxing district, where we could capture those cars coming off of 64, get their money, and then send them back on the road. Now you're not paying all of the cost of community services, but you're getting that revenue. A lot of that being built around the Wawa that we have coming in on the corner, but it ends up, it seems that's not something you can do in the state of Virginia.
So we have to do something in our county, right? And it's been this way. We talked about this last night forever, for as long as I've been at the county. The local side of the budget, 95, 97%, depending on who you talk to, comes from rooftops, and 5 to 7% come from commercial. So we have to figure out some way to capsulate that. In Ned's case, it's closer to 30%, right? 30% of Albemarle County comes from it, and I know we're talking about Fluvanna, and I want to jump in on Albemarle, but let's face it, this is election year, gents, right? And you may or may not be running. You may want to talk about this today or not. That's cool, whatever you're comfortable with. But what are we going to?
I am. Go ahead.
The question is now who's running against
Yeah.
us. But anyway, so what are we going to do to change that dynamic?
In Fluvanna?
Yeah.
Well, we're doing it. I'll start with Jennifer Schmack, our economic development director, is a rock star. And she is just doing a wonderful job. There's a lot in the mix that's, at this point, all closed session, or the mass of it's closed session.
Sure.
Where you can't talk about it. But we've got a lot happening, and
And we're gonna move that 5 to 7 to some other number.
that will be changing soon. The percentage, I haven't done the math. And, in Zions Crossroads, a lot of people for a long time have been saying, Chris, why don't we on our side of 64 do what they're doing on the Louisa side? And my response is typically, well, we don't have a side of 64. All four corners of 15 and 64 are Louisa. Fluvanna doesn't start until 9/10 of a mile on the Palmyra side of 250. 9/10 of a mile off 64. So the old adage, real estate, real estate, real estate, there's a reason Walgreens is on a corner and CVS is on the opposite corner. And we just haven't been in that position yet. However, that Green Springs district is starting to bump up towards the top of that planning area. and on our side, starting to fill in back to there. And our day is coming, and we're there. Again, Wawa's coming, and let's just say there's a good chance that behind that Wawa might be a lot more commerce.
They usually follow. I mean, that's a logical step, right, on that. How's things looking in Albemarle?
Well, we're trying. I mean, before this particular budget, we were in that like 66% was coming from property. And we directed the county executive years ago to say we need to start moving that number down. But how do you do that is the economic development. It's the same answer. We have a little bit, we have a different demand coming in where our meals tax and transient occupancy tax, that stuff, we pulled dollars from that. But that is capped at the state. So like our food and beverage, I think, is at the cap already. I don't think we're at the cap on the TOT, but we're in line with the city at 9%. But our big thing, the economic development initiative. So I've been using 3 examples. Obviously, the 462 acres that we purchased around Fluvanna Station. But that's not going to, it's going to take years before we start to realize the impact of that. But that is the long game of trying to then take the pressure off of the property tax. The ones we'll see get online that will make a difference, Fashion Square Mall. If you looked at the assessed value of Fashion Square Mall compared to 10 and 12 years ago, we've lost a ton of revenue as that site has done nothing but decline.
Yeah.
So we're turning that around right now, right? Home Depot is going to be, I hear they're going to be open by July now, I think somebody said. They have to be open by Christmas of this year based on tax or an incentive that we gave them to help get it built. Good for Albemarle County because it meant that they were going to open sooner. We also got an easement for about, 95% of a road realignment that we're interested in doing behind the mall on Hillsdale Drive. And that would have cost $8, $9, $10 million in today's dollars. Who knows what it would cost in 5 years or 10 years. So when that Home Depot opens, we've got the Public Safety Center over there on the other side that a different owner owns, the old JCPenney site. Belk has got its own little thing. But Home Depot Home Depot will own most of that property. And once they get the box store open, then they have to go, all right, now what are we going to do and redevelop? And if they make some efforts to achieve our small area plan, then you can start to see some mixture of retail and residential. And I hear Home Depot has done some of that in other places. They're not just box store. They do other types of developments. And then there's smaller things that matter too. Down the road, there'll be a project coming to us here in the next month or so where Brightspeed currently is out on Railroad West, and it's a utility. So guess what? We don't collect any tax from that property. But if a new company comes in and takes that over and they're not a utility, they're going to be on the tax rolls. So it's small things like that we hit from those small things all the way up to the big investment like we did around Fluvanna Futures that eventually is going to take this 68%. If we pass the current projected proposed tax rate increases, that would put it up to about 68%, and it's just not based on other comparable communities and where they're at. You want that commercial piece to be greater than what it is right now in Albemarle County.
So for those who are listening, who may not know the complication of the Fashion Square Mall, it's owned by several different
Richard Hewitt owns the JCPenney. Belk owns the Belk location corporate. Fashion Square Mall now owned by Home Depot. One thing to add some color to what Supervisor Gallaway said, Home Depot also has the responsibility of revitalizing the Red Lobster location.
Yeah.
So perhaps the most influential or one of the most influential developers guys in Albemarle County is a Fortune 100 company publicly traded in Home Depot, because this is one of the most important gateways of Albemarle County. Also your district.
Right, it's right in the center.
You hit the heartbeat of his district here. So follow this very closely. The July news is big time.
I don't know, I can't confirm that. That's something I heard somebody else say they thought it was July.
That's the first I've heard of that.
Kind of spreading a little rumor.
Yeah.
The deadline that I know for sure
December.
is Christmas Eve of 25.
Yeah.
So if they come, but I drive past there every single day, and it's incredible how quick
They don't mess around.
up. And I suspect, just based on that, now I don't, the interior and stuff, they have to do a lot of work yet. So I'm not trying to put pressure on or up people's expectations, but I think it's fair to say that I don't think they're necessarily going to wait around till Christmas Eve.
I respect that.
There's a time when Home Depot at their peak was opening a store, I think it was one store on average just less than every 24 hours or something like that. So they're a machine. I suspect once
Is that one of your customers?
No.
Well, the very interesting aspect is Home Depot is going to be pretty much across the street from Lowe's. So we're going to see how the Lowe's and Home Depot dynamic plays out and where market share comes from.
And there was a time where that Lowe's was the number 2 highest grossing.
Yeah, that is since no longer the case, though.
Is it right?
Yeah, but there was a time that. You're 100% right on that. I'd love to throw this to Supervisor Gallaway, and I think Supervisor Fairchild is going to have some good perspective for this. What is the dynamic or the crossroad of tax increases to fund affordability, housing affordability initiatives, at the same time tax increases pinching the middle class
In raising the cost to own the home?
and raising the cost on the home?
Yeah.
Those seem to be almost
While
a contradiction to me.
And a third component
Excuse
to
me.
that,
I'm sorry.
while both of our jurisdictions, prices are going up.
We just moved to Ivy which is the Jack Jewett district here. 23% assessment increase year over year
So-
on our house.
So
That ain't cheap.
Wow.
while you're thinking about, just to add some context to the sales side of it, the same time period, right, year to date versus last year, your single-family detached, and this includes new construction, actually didn't go up as much as ours did. It only went up just a little bit shy of a half a point. It went from 710 to 713. So on the single-family detached, you're just climbing a little bit, which feels like a normal percentage for the first 3 months. The attached stuff went up 3%. So that's townhomes and duplexes.
But we need to highlight that the median value is $713,000. Okay, so while you're saying it only uptick 0.42%, we're still talking $713,000.
And I get
That's Albemarle County.
And I get that, Jerry. That's the reason I threw that in there for a third component of the conversation.
Well, go ahead.
Yeah, please. Love to hear what Ned has to say on this.
Well, and it's on the heels of the fact that 2 years ago, it was on average, 7-8% in Albemarle County. Last year, it was 13%.
Compounded.
This year, the 5% isn't exactly representative residential, because if you take commercial and some big multifamily out, it actually, in my district, the bigger neighborhoods all around my district, we get a little breakout for each of our districts, and the commercial's not in there, and it's about 7-8% in Rio what the actual increase is. So I understand. We are not just trying to pull revenue in from the property tax. We just spoke about the economic development that we hope will eventually allow us to reduce or not rely on it so heavily, which would ultimately help with those costs. But in the meantime, with the services we feel we need to provide and to try to give support, which we are being advocated strongly to give more support for affordable housing specifically, well, we have to go to our revenue sources to find it. So, that may mean down the road that what we're doing now may not continue to exist. But when whether it's been assessments and we haven't equalized the rate down, or if we haven't raised the actual tax rate since 2019. When we do it, I always say, well, if I explain to folks what those dollars are going to go for and be clear about it and why we need the extra tax income to come in, then they can decide whether or not they agree with us or not about that. So this 4-cent tax increase that's proposed right now is a little different than what we did back in 2019. That 2019 tax rate increase was actually approved, was to meet the bond referendum for the schools that got passed back in, when did that pass? 17, 16? So that tax rate got delayed a year because we didn't need it, but when we put it in place, it was to meet that bond referendum. This 4 cents, it would be dedicated 3.2 cents to public safety. And what does that mean? Well, if you don't dedicate it, it means all the dollars go into what we call the split. And roughly it's 10% to capital. So the new revenue would get split 10% to capital, and it's about 60% to, or 56% to schools. I'm not doing the math right here. It goes to capital, schools, and government by the way that we do our split. If you dedicate it, then it doesn't go into that split, and all that new realized revenue would go to what you dedicate it to. So in the current proposal, it's 3.2 for public safety, which are fire and police officers. That's 6 police officers, and we've added since 2021 97 fire positions.
Wow.
And we did a lot of that using FEMA SAFER grants, which helps you get the money up front from the federal government, lets them get trained, get up to speed, but eventually the cost comes over to your locality. So that's what we've been realizing. We were great in winning these competitive grants, but now the cost is coming home and we have to cover it. So that 3.2 cents is about roughly $10 million. That's all going to be dedicated to public safety items. None of that 10 million will be split between local government and the schools in the traditional way. 0.4 cents is dedicated to affordable housing. This would be the first time that we would be dedicating ongoing revenue to the affordable housing issue. The dollar amount for that's 1.2 million at the 0.4 cent increase, and then the other 0.4 cents would go to schools. So since that's the current proposal, there started to be some conversations the other day in our work session that maybe some supervisors are interested in that split cutting out differently. So we'll see how that goes when we pick things back up on Monday.
Well, Supervisor Pruitt has certainly made that very clear.
As has Supervisor Malik introduced some thoughts on the matter.
Yeah, yeah.
So we'll see where we get on Monday.
This comment's come in for Supervisor Gallaway. To add to Jerry's comments, my assessment went up 28.3% in Albemarle County, so adding another 4% is a 32.3% increase. How can the board expect working families to come up with several $1,000s overnight?
Well, I appreciate that comment and understand it, and that's why we have to decide if we're going to do it or not by the time we finish this budget. And it's not just their property tax. We're increasing the real personal property tax rate, which is actually returning us to what we were pre-pandemic at $4.28 per assessed. We had reduced that back then, and then we got it halfway back to $3.96, which is the current one, and it's going to go up to $4.28. You have to go to your taxpayers and say, here's what we need. And if we have a funding gap, we have to say, well, we're going to ask you for more revenue, and here's what it's going to be used, here's what it's going to pay for. And do you agree with that or not? Are those important things? And if a lot of your citizens tell you no, well, then you have different decisions to make. And if you disagree with them, then that's when election time tries to equalize that. How do I answer the question, how do I expect people to come up with $1,000 overnight, a couple $1,000s? I don't expect them to. But the reality is that this is how we grow revenue, is through our tax rates. And right now, we have services that we need to provide, we are expected to provide, that people want us to provide, and we need to come back out to the taxpayers right now and say, in addition to this assessed, or your rising assessments, we need to hit at a different rate to be able to afford those services that a lot of you want us to provide.
I respect that answer. I respect that. It's not an easy position. Please, I can't wait to hear your answer on this.
Well, I had a question. So I think Albemarle, as you said, you all maintain the same rate, right? So if there's a bump in values, that bumps the tax.
We get more revenue. We've not equalized the rate down, even with these big increases. We've kept the tax rate the same. So it's been 84.9 since 2019.
Yeah. But that's changing.
But now we're saying we're going to take that to 89.4. That's what I say. 85.4 is the current. It'll go to 89.4.
So a 4-cent increase on the rate, while assessments since COVID have gone bananas.
Yeah.
Right.
Like compound year over year bananas.
So I'm not remembering the revenue amount that we would get just at the new rate. It's about 5%. That's the average increase. So the tax rate itself brings in an additional about $13.3 million. So that's what the new tax rate gets us. But we are already getting increased revenues from the bump in assessments, and we have been. That's why we've not had to touch our tax rate since 2019. It's because we've effectively been pulling in more taxes, but not because we've had to change the rate, but because, Jerry's, what'd you say, your home went up? Your home went up
23% year over year.
So that increase has meant more revenue coming into us. Now, when folks in the past years, it's been the same question. Well, my tax bill's going up. What are you using that money for? And that's what budget season's about, and that's why I say, well, pay attention to us. Because if you want to make a decision on me, if my name's on a ballot, I'm going to say what my priorities are, and I should be following those priorities when I program dollars. So I'll say it point blank right now. The 3.2 cents, I get what we've had to do in our fire department, but we haven't added, I think in the same time frame over the last 10 or 15 years, we've only added maybe 7, 8 positions. It might be more than that in the police. But our police department is only about 1.3 or 1.4 officers per 1,000 people. We're massively understaffed in our police department. And this is at a time right now where public safety is of a major concern in our county. And I say that, and it's from as simple as the everyday speeding concerns that I hear. That's the biggest safety thing I hear from constituents, all the way up to some of the violent crime that has hit our community over the last few years. And, you know, just policing the roads and dealing with the traffic. We had 3 tractor trailers overturned in this county in the last month. When your police department goes out for a tractor trailer overturn, and then some other call comes in and they have to spread for that, can't be spreading these men and women too thin. In the Rio District in 2024, there were 16,000 calls for service and I think I broke that out. That's something like 200 calls a day. And if it's just police or citizen initiated, when it was like 45 calls a day. Well, we don't, you know, that's something happening there that means that police needs to respond. And you can't just keep pulling that thin. We have got to reinforce them.
Can I add, so the reason I asked about if you've maintained the same rate, and just to add for my constituents who we say, law says we have to equalize, if I understand right, you all do, technically you equalize and then bump the rate back, right? So by law, it might be just in the office. You got to go through the equalization process, and then you can bring it back to what that rate is. I think Fluvanna is either one of, if not the only municipality in our region that truly equalizes, and so let's just say 84.4 is where we're at. We don't maintain 84.4 going into the new year. If values go up, we actually do go to our equalized rate and then start building our new tax rate off of that.
But I just want to be careful. That doesn't necessarily mean I'm not going to pay more cash, right? I might end up paying more than $5,000 come the next, even if you hit the equalization rate.
That's what I was saying earlier.
Valuation.
If your values went up,
Yeah.
then even if you equalize, you're going to pay a little bit more based upon
Yeah.
the value. And I'm not saying good, bad, or indifferent. I'm just saying in our case, and I understand the argument for the other side, but in our case, we don't get the extra bump from the revenues. If your values go up 20%,
Well,
we don't get 20%
I'll put it in perspective.
more.
10 years ago, I was paying half. And I agree with you. You equalize almost every year. I've never seen it not happen.
Yeah.
But I'm paying double in cash than I was paying 10 years ago.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's relevant to what I'm saying, though. I mean, to
Okay, I'll tell
that
you.
taxpayer's concern,
Yeah.
what they're saying is, what'd you say values went up in Albemarle?
Albemarle County, on average, what was it?
It was the average countywide was 5. But
Yeah.
That was everything. Residential's probably in the 7-8%
right.
range.
I think that's right. Yeah.
So I guess I'm just saying that's the difference to my constituents. That's a difference of how we do it. They're not seeing that, let's say the average residential, well, just countywide was, again, like 23 or 24. We're not going to get the income off of 23 or 24 and then reap the tax increase off of it, on top of it.
The point he's going to make is he's going to make his parents being gentrified out of their house. That's what you're going to make, right? Where they're on a fixed budget and they're now moving into a basement apartment at
No.
his house.
A terrace level independent living
Okay, there we go.
facility.
Yeah. I'm very curious of your take, of that dynamic between increasing, improving the tax base or expanding the tax base for affordable housing initiatives.
Yeah, I think the mass of our citizens are not for continuing to increase taxes, for government to participate in the building of homes, be it apartments or what. And I say continue to, because we do have an apartment complex now that it was before I was on the board, but it came in and the county is giving 10 years of zero taxes on the buildings, 124 apartments, I don't know how many buildings that is, 10 years of zero taxes, and then the next 5 years it escalates by 20% to where it's not until year 15 that they pay the full amount of taxes. And that was something that the citizens, that's tax money that the citizens gave up in order to put those apartments there. And
That seems insane to me.
there are people in Fluvanna who agree with you.
I mean, absolutely insane.
Yeah.
Because of the strain on infrastructure when the revenue is not being generated for what was created. That's just absolutely insanity to me.
So when I first heard about that, I said, okay, so the narrative is always that the burden is on the rooftops. So we got to build more business to take the burden off the rooftops. But then we build homes to bring people in, apartments or homes. We build apartments or in homes that we subsidize to bring people in, which means they brought no real estate revenue off those buildings. So now if you, on average, you had to have X amount of economic development to take the pressure off of those that do pay the taxes, now you just brought in residential that pays no taxes. So how much more business do you need to balance that out? And I'm not saying there's a good and right answer, and it's different per municipality, but that's a theme and concern in Fluvanna.
Well, isn't that, and I don't know, but I think Will Park talked about this in his session yesterday
Yeah.
in that project. That project has commercial on it that does get taxed. So the tax abatement's just for the residential, right? It's
Well,
how they make these projects work sometimes.
So it's 200, how many units is it? 324 units, 125 are the departments, 24 you're talking
Yeah.
about. There's 200 residential construction, townhomes and single-family detached, which, by the way, they'll be built out by the end of this year. And there's a gas station site and about 60,000 square feet of commercial, which is about ready to hit the market.
So is the tax abatement on the full property or just the
just the
affordable?
apartments.
So just the
apartments. So
affordable
they're
units.
getting
Right.
taxes on the single-family detached, single-family attached.
So
and
the
commercial.
insanity is not necessarily insane, right? Because you're subsidizing to get those affordable units because the commercial should bring some revenue in. So it's not like you're not collecting anything on the whole property, the whole site. Your market rate units and your commercial stuff will bring in revenue for you.
I would love to hear his response to that. Yeah, wait to hear this response.
Some is the key word.
Yeah, there we go.
You know, who cares about revenue without profit in the business world? The expense
There it
of
is.
those homes is going to be higher than the revenue. So it's still a net negative to the taxpayers who are currently there.
Well, I get it, but I've made this comment a few times over the last few days, and I don't mean to be disparaging, but I'm saying that poor people can't live in this area without subsidy. That's fact.
So while you guys have been talking, I've been crunching numbers.
I don't think that's necessarily a fair statement there, Francis.
Middle class folks are starting to have a hard time living in here without some subsidy. That's just fact.
But can it respectfully, Supervisor Gallaway, tremendous respect for you. If we raise the taxes on middle-class folks, that's going to push the middle-class folks out first. Isn't that pretty straightforward?
So, okay, but it's not just the tax rate that's going to push them out. There are bigger things that can push folks out of a community. The market rate that's hugely climbing with those assessment pieces is not allowing them to come in and build new, right? Land use policies. So, right, I would almost argue that our land use policies do more to affect that value and to push
100%.
people out in the cost, and that's a bigger burden than the tax rate.
5% of Albemarle County is allocated for development. That's what he's talking about right there. Some folks are asking to expand the development area beyond 5%. I am vehemently opposed to that. I live in Albemarle County because I love the green aspect of Albemarle County. This is a county I'm choosing to live in because I like to see green, not Fredericksburg, not Northern Virginia. I know that's the sentiment in Fluvanna County.
Yeah.
I really like a lot of Fluvanna County. Frankly, you should talk about this. Please, I would love to get this out, and then Keith, you jump in here. What is a lot of people have a misconception that if you build more houses, that the tax base is going to increase. I'd love to hear your take on that.
Yeah, so I hear that from many, that, well, you're just putting more, of course the government wants more development, more residential, it just puts more money in the coffers. And I understand where that thinking would come from, while on average, I think it was 2 years ago, a study was done throughout the state, on average, for every dollar in residential tax revenue, it's $1.18 in expenses. So roughly a 20% net loss. And so as those people come in, and God bless them, and growth is inevitable. It's going to happen. You got to plan for it. I have wonderful friends who are come here's, not from here's, And I'm blessed by that. While still the math, that doesn't change the math, that the more you have residential development, the more your cost of living goes up through schools, fire trucks, and so on. So I always say if you're trying to promote that, my question would be, if it gets rid of your trees and fields but raises your cost of living, what are you working towards?
I'm purposely staying quiet about this. You want to jump in?
Well, I mean, in Albemarle, it's been our plan because of how we've proposed it. 5% should be where the development area gets targeted and gets pushed, and that 95% is that rural area, and that's us trying to plan for that inevitability.
Yeah.
And so, but what's happening is that it pushes all the burden of the density into that development area, and the type of housing stock is not the whole gamut of choice for living. So if you wanted to come here and you're one of the come heres that wants to come raise your family, and you would love to have a home that was $300,000, $400,000 brand new or build brand new, you can't do that. That's not an option right now. So that's what I mean by even the middle class are going to need some help to be able to make that work. I mean, Keith knows that working with his land trust. When he explains the math to me, and what the AMI at 124,000 and what it needs to be able to get the folks into that home. Well, you do one of two things: you subsidize and help them do it, or you don't, and they don't live here.
So I've been wanting to jump in on that math, and did not want to interrupt the conversation because it was going in the right direction. But I did some math on your $1.2 million, to your point. So 80% AMI, area medium income, right? Which in the area median income is $124,200. That is for our region, which includes Fluvanna County, Albemarle County,
That's
right?
a 2023 number.
That's
the
a 20
2024 number is about to come out.
100% is going to come out.
That's going to be higher.
100% higher.
Yeah.
So these are lagging indicators because
Yeah.
the number is going to get worse. So at 80% AMI, at that number, so the area median, so that is for a household, right? So 2 cops or 2 firemen or whatever. I want to make that. In order for them to buy a home, at today's interest rate, the cap number then goes about $200,000. So if I'm using in Albemarle County attached product, which is where the first-time home buyer is going in your thing, at $464,000, which is the medium sales price, you can only do 4 units with that $1.2 million. Now, if you jump that number to 100% AMI, which is 124,200, you can jump that number to 7, right? So the point is that $1.2 million isn't going to buy you that much in your county, our county. So we've got a medium sales price of $370. So we're about $170 short at the 80%, and we're $70,000 short in the $300,000. We had a conversation yesterday where we're going to go, Buckingham County, right? We talk about this on the show all the time. Where is the first-time home buyer going to go? And it just keeps on going out and out and out. But at those type of price ranges, teachers, cops, firemen, so can't leave in either one of our counties because the subsidy is that long. And as far as our county is concerned, as taxes go up, because prices are going to go up, we're going to start pricing people out of our county, and as Jerry said, it'd be my parents. But I just wanted to put a perspective to it, what an 80 and 100% area median income and what the current market rate is now that it's going to grade, how much subsidy is needed to make that work, or some other solution than subsidy. And I'll shut up and let you guys talk.
Chris, you want to jump in on that?
I mean, it's the argument or debate over the extent that government gets involved in the private sector. And there are good arguments of course, on both sides. And I mentioned yesterday, sometimes you got to go to the saying from a justice in the 1960s, I'll know it when I see it. And
you got to add context to that, though.
It was over porn, but yeah. And so everybody wants to help their neighbor and wants their neighbor to prosper. And the balancing act in question comes in the extent that you help pay for that for your neighbor to get there.
So I've been really trying to hold things back, but I'm going to kind of go into this a little bit at the moment. We don't need money to make this work. What we need is the red tape to turn to green tape. What we need to do as far as developers go and affordable and nonprofit affordable is to rework the rules and the pathway so that we can make it happen. I don't need money to build affordable housing in Fluvanna County. I just got to be allowed to do it, right? I had a great conversation at the convention at the summit yesterday with Lloyd, talking about the city zoning ordinance. And at our executive committee, at our full body meeting, he was jumping in along with Mike Payne going, they don't understand why new houses are actually being built.
This is...
And they're not being built in the city of Charlottesville because of the red tape. Because in order to do it, you have, 3 units or more, it's a full site plan, it's a couple of $100,000, it's years down the line. You have to do E&S impacts and all these different things that just make it so expensive. As a land trust chair and provider, I have multiple parcels in the city of Charlottesville that we can't build affordable housing on. I'm not asking for money, I'm just asking for the rules to be looked at a little bit differently so we can actually produce them. Your county, right, 80% AMI. If we're allowed to do 115, I can make some magic happen without asking any money.
Well, here's what I've learned over the last few years of watching projects that have gone up, not just in our area, but when you try to learn, like the 2 associate directors of economic development, it was from Prince George's County, was that the right county?
Yeah.
And also from the city of Richmond were there yesterday. And in Will Park and Steve's presentation, this isn't just, the answer's in the private sector, or it's just public subsidy.
100%.
It's a combination of a bunch of things. When you look at successful projects, yes, there could be some tax abatement. Yes, there might be land leases if it's county or city-owned land. Yes, there could be some regulation streamlining that can happen to help save time, because time, it does add to the cost factor of it. And yes, private developers get together and start working with one another. Look, I'm a residential developer, you're a commercial developer, let's team up and see what we can do to figure this out. Some are more expert at doing the low-income tax credits or not. But I haven't seen a single project in our summit presentations and the Virginia Governors Housing Association's summit presentations that made one tool make an affordable project work, where it was like, it's just tax abatement, or it's just regulation piece.
He's going to say
it's got to be a combination of it all.
I know this. I finished this.
Go ahead, say it.
It's Robert Liberty, the silver buckshot. It's not just it's
not a
just
silver bullet.
It's a silver buckshot.
The reason he says it, because every time I say it, I got to Venmo $5 to Robert Liberty.
And I want to respectfully push back on you. The reason that there's been no development in the city of Charlottesville is with the new zoning ordinance, 10% of units with development projects of 99 units or more have to be affordable for 99 years at a 60% AMI.
And
that math does not pencil out for a developer. And secondly, with all due respect, there's an active lawsuit against the new zoning ordinance.
100%.
What developer is going to pursue a zoning code that may change tomorrow?
I'm talking low-hanging fruit. I've got a land trust that I want to build 12 units, that I'm allowed to do it by right, that I can't do it because the development expenses are too expensive. If they can retool that, then we can produce it, because from a land trust perspective, we don't care about the lawsuits because it doesn't matter to us. We're going to move forward with it no matter what. But I can't do it because the math doesn't work out. And I had a great conversation with a nonprofit and a for-profit. They both got the same problems, right? They both have the same development problems. But in order to make this work, we'll have to. I wanted to give a shout out to Ned in Albemarle County, and I want to talk.
Ned does a great job, folks.
I want to talk about a success, right? So I'm putting land trust hat on, and if you can let me bore you for a second, a land trust hat on. We just wrapped up producing 30 permanent affordable housing. And how did we do that? We connected, to your point, with a local developer, local builder, local commercial thing. We sat down and talked to your county. We were gracious enough to get $650,000 worth of grant. But what was more important than that was helping us navigate the interpretation of ordinances and so forth and so on to get there. So your staff chimed in. We then teamed up with 2 other nonprofits, PHA and ourselves, and within 18 months, we sold, built, and put in 30 permanent affordable housing, which, by the way, we just sold our first one, and that buyer walked away with $50,000 cash in their pocket, and they're walking up to housing ladder, right? They're moving into a market rate house and comes in because it's a 99-year program, it came in and bought it, and we have new people climbing that ladder. So to your point, Ned, this isn't all about money. This is all about how we work together to try to figure it out, and that's what yesterday was about.
I would add, go back a little bit. Again, it's a balancing act. Let's say a municipality does free up where you can build more of those residential units. Well, back to the roughly 20% cost above revenue.
It's a real issue, yeah.
You just, let's say that the average home in Fluvanna couldn't go, more than a month or two without a paycheck, and yet we're going to increase their taxes.
So that's what yesterday was about. That's what this conversation's about. That's why I love having this conversation with you, because we may not see the same thing,
Yeah.
but we understand the challenges, right? And we're not just throwing our hands up and saying, well, we're not going to do anything about it, right? We're in, what was Theodore Roosevelt's In the Arena speech, right? We're staying in the arena, we're staying in the fight, because even though we all may think about this differently on how to get there, we understand what the problem is, and we're willing to try to put in the extra hours to do it. Like
Yeah.
the conversation we had yesterday, you're running again, and Ned may or may not be running, but that's a 40-hour-a-week job for you. I'm trying to bait you, brother. That's a 40-hour-a-week job, and you guys bust your butts to go ahead and do it. So,
Well, budget season is certainly a busy time of year, but yeah, I'll leave it at that.
I'd love to throw this to Supervisor Gallaway here. We bumped the tax rate 4 cents. And with a 4-cent bump, while assessments are popping as well, $1.2 million is being created for housing affordability.
Ongoing, yeah.
$1.2 million in 2025 buys you a couple of tents and some coolers.
Well, here's what,
technically four
That's,
townhomes.
has anyone shot for some tents and some coolers at Dick's? It ain't cheap.
so I think right now, and I think this is interesting because sometimes, given the locality, I don't know. I guess I don't know in Virginia how many counties are split politically, like by the traditional Dems, Republicans, that sort of thing. But we're all Democrats on the Albemarle County Board. But we're not of one mind of how to go about affordable housing in terms of the funding and the mechanisms. Now, we are all committed to trying to attack the issue and do things for it. But there are some that would even want more. So right now, in addition to the 1.2, that 1.2 from the 0.4 cents, we're saying that's even dedicated in the future years. And that, like when I say that's the first time we're going to give ongoing revenue for it, prior to this year, our housing fund was brought in by one-time money that came up from surplus. So if you have revenues go up more than you anticipated and what you budgeted for, or expenditures are different, and you gain those extra revenue dollars, we have chose to use that money in other ways for one-time things, and that has been to put in our housing fund. Every time we've put money in the housing fund, I think the biggest year that we got to was like $5 million. July 1 is when the fiscal year is over. By the end of July of that fiscal year, all that $5 million was gone because $20 million of requests came in, and it didn't get us very far. So there are folks and the advocates, we had around 30 people show up for our budget public hearing. 2 or 3 spoke to don't raise our taxes. Now, we've been getting emails in. I'm just speaking specifically to the folks that showed up in the Lane Auditorium. All the others, it wasn't about don't raise taxes. It was about how to use the money. So affordable housing folks want more money coming their way.
Sure.
There were school advocates there that want more money going to the schools.
Sure.
So when you hear some of that sentiment, and I'm saying to folks that if you don't want your tax rate increase, speak up. You got to come out and talk to us. You got to send your emails. Some are. So continue that, because all that information is going to come in.
This is a tough job. This is easy
Yeah.
for me on that microphone to go blah, blah,
Oh,
blah.
yeah, we're Monday morning quarterbacking.
Yeah.
Well, here's
It's
what I was going to say, though. $1.2 million isn't necessarily we're just going to go buy a home for somebody or put it in.
It's for other things.
There are some supervisors that would like, and even if we formed a trust fund, even how that trust fund would work and operate, we have varying ideas on how that could be. And yesterday, that's why I love the summit, man, that we had talking about how some places give 0% loans out to developers. It lets them get a job done because of the way you're lending it. They pay that money back, so you get the units and you also get your money back, right? You could use that money if you could build an investment pool or a trust fund up high enough where it could start bringing investment returns in. You're allowed to do that with trust funds. Then that could start self-watering a little bit down the road. But that's you're not going to do that with $5 million. You need a higher amount. So there's creative ways to get at it where you can take, I think every county supervisor, every jurisdiction, every city councilor, we're always trying to turn $1 into $2 or $3 or $4. And that's we just right now are thinking of different ways. We will be having a conversation about the trust fund coming up here. I don't know the exact date, but I think it's in March before we get to April and finish this budget up.
So we're way beyond our time. So and I want to thank Jerry for letting that happen. But this is an important discussion. I think I'm just going to wrap it up around this and stay around housing. And we talked a little bit about this, you and I offline, Chris. The reason I'm so passionate about the regional housing partnership, because housing is regional. What happens in Ned's county impacts Fluvanna County, right? So housing is not just a jurisdictional bubble, right? It impacts what happens in Charlottesville and Albemarle impacts us, impacts Green. So the fact that you're at the table is huge, right? And your voice is super important. So I wanted to thank you for that.
And I think we learn from each other, which is what yesterday was about.
And that's what I wanted to end my statement. So thank you for wrapping that up for me.
Yeah,
This is fun.
Without the vitriol. We can talk, we can disagree, we can have these debates, but if you know you can learn from one another, then you don't feel like you have to get in an attack mode or defensive mode.
The takeaway here is we all give a shit.
Yeah.
And we're all trying to do the best we can to get it there. We may not have the magic answers, but we're at the table trying to have the conversation.
Any announcements you want to make?
I will make this announcement. On March 18th, Tuesday at the center, will be the one public budget town hall that I'm doing that I'll definitely be at. If I'm attending others, I might not be the lead supervisor, but we have a series, go to our website, series of town halls on the budget, but that's going to be an opportunity for the folks at RIO to come out and hear what we're doing with this money, hear what decisions we're making, how the discussions are going, and then they'll have an opportunity to ask questions and tell us how they feel.
And when you're ready to talk a little bit more about it, we'll give you a mic to go ahead and talk about that. Anybody running against you that you know about?
Not yet.
No scuttlebutt?
No, I mean, you always hear stories, and there's always chatter, and there's always people who are unhappy about what you're doing. So there's a lot of season left until November.
And you would rather have a contested than an uncontested race?
I'll take it either way. I can't affect it, so I'm going to roll with what I get.
Do what you can control.
Yeah, I mean, if it was to come,
Thank you, gentlemen. We're
coming out tomorrow.
Keith Smith, Chris Fairchild, and Ned Gallaway. Judah Wickower behind the camera. Props to Judah. Keeps us on air. Sincerely mean that. This is Real Talk with Keith Smith. We did not get to, I think we missed 30 comments and questions from the viewers and listeners, so we'll have to do this again. And we went an hour and 15 minutes without stopping, folks, here. The I Love CVille show is up at 12:30, where we'll continue some of this discussion, guys. So thank you for joining us so long.
Thank you.
It was great, guys. That flew by.
Yeah.
Probably did not